From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington as the U.S. carries out strikes against sites in Iraq and Syria in retaliation for the drone attack that killed 3 U.S. service members last weekend. This is breaking and developing as we speak. We'll talk ahead with former ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey. The judge in Donald Trump's D.C. election obstruction case postponing the trial date today. It had been set for the 4th of March. The delay to allow for the appellate court to rule on his claim of immunity. A blockbuster January jobs report blowing predictions out of the water today and challenging expectations for a rate cut in May. We'll get reaction from Heather Boushey of the Council of Economic Advisors. Thanks for being with us this evening on Bloomberg TV and radio. As we mentioned, breaking news. We're actually following 3 major stories that we're going to cover for you over the course of this hour, beginning now with Bloomberg's Dan Flatley. Dan, thanks for being with us as we begin to get a sense of the size and scale of these strikes. We've just heard from CENTCOM. What do we know?
Well, we know, Joe, that several sites were struck, about a dozen, as we understand it at the moment. Some 85 different targets. So just to go back to some strikes that we saw in recent weeks, just because there's 85 targets doesn't mean there's 85 sites. There can be multiple targets at one site. Over 100 different types of munitions used and some long-range bombers coming from the U.S. So certainly something that the administration talked a little bit about earlier this week, and we anticipated this, obviously, in response to the 3 American service members who were killed in Jordan over this past weekend.
These targets in Iraq and Syria, as opposed to Iran itself. Right. There was a deliberation about how far to go here. This apparently is the beginning. We were told these would be multi-tiered strikes. What should we expect after this, then?
Well, we don't exactly know what's to come next. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and others within the Biden administration have talked about a multi-tiered response. What they're trying to do, as you alluded to just a moment ago, Joe, is avoid a wider regional conflict. So they have held back, at least at the moment, from striking Iran. There's really no reason at this point to anticipate that they will strike targets in mainland Iran. But we expect, in addition to these airstrikes today, potentially some more strikes and on a rolling basis over the potentially next few days. But certainly a strong response at the moment, and we'll have to see how it's received in the region and by folks on the Hill and elsewhere.
Sure. The hardware is a bit different than what we've been seeing with strikes, from F-16s or F-15s, maybe cruise missiles coming from ships. Dan, CENTCOM now telling us more than 125 precision munitions were used, and in some cases coming out of heavy bombers. This is a new level.
It's a new level. I think it's not as targeted. I mean, if you'll recall, we saw in response to the Red Sea attacks that have been going on for several weeks, targeted strikes on limited sites in some areas in the Middle East. This is certainly a little bit more than that. When you have long-range bombers involved, that's going to be a heavier type of munition that's involved. But, in terms of spreading beyond Iraq and Syria, we don't see any indication that that's happening yet. So it still seems to be tied really to these American service members who were killed in Jordan.
And Dan, do we know these bombers flew from the U.S.
According to
the other side
CENTCOM,
of the
they
world?
said that they long-range bombers from the U.S.
As opposed to our bases in the Middle East.
Right.
An important detail there. Dan, thank you so much for breaking news here. Bloomberg's Dan Flatley reporting from our bureau in Washington, and our national security team suddenly very busy tonight. We're going to have a lot more on this story and a conversation a bit later on with former ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey. Elsewhere, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan canceling now the planned March 4th trial that she had set for Donald Trump's election obstruction case. Another breaker today here in the Capitol, and Bloomberg's Eric Larson joins us with more from our legal reporting team. Eric, we saw this court date fall off the docket a bit earlier. Is this to make room or allow time for Donald Trump's immunity challenge?
I believe so. I mean, this judge has a lot of planning to do to get a trial this big and wide-ranging going. And as the judge said in her brief order today, there was a jury summons that was supposed to happen in about a week's time. That was also canceled. So given how long we've been waiting for this ruling from the Federal Appeals Court in Washington on Trump's immunity challenge, it's just been taking a little while, I think a little longer than expected. People, I think, some experts were expecting that the court would make a decision sooner on whether Trump is actually immune from these charges because they happened while he was president. So all eyes are on the appeals court right now. That decision could be handed down very soon, and we could then get another trial date very soon, but we really don't know.
In the meantime, then, Eric, it's entirely possible that the case is in New York. Alvin Bragg's case, the fraud case, might actually be heard, the trial be heard before the special counsel's case in Washington. That's exactly what Donald Trump was hoping for, isn't it?
Well, that would mean that the first criminal case to go to trial, as you said, would be here in Manhattan in the so-called hush money case that starts March 25th. Trump is accused of falsifying business records to hide a hush money payment to a porn star just before the 2016 election. Anything that delays any of these trials is honestly going to be a benefit to Trump because he's been wanting to delay them all along to get them closer to the election and make it so that they should just take place after the election. That's what he's wanted all along. So, but for right now, we're expecting that one to go ahead.
If they're moved to after the election, there's a good chance they don't happen at all, right? Eric, are we going to be in a world possibly where Alvin Bragg has the final word before the 2024 election?
I mean, anything is possible. We also have that Georgia case, another state case, which, it's not as easy for a president to try to shut down a state case, of course, if Trump were to be elected. So that case is also in trouble. There's other news out of that Fulton County prosecution today as well, with the turmoil over the district or the Fulton County district attorney and that relationship with her lawyer on the case. So there's just so many questions swirling around all of these trials right now. There's no trial date set in that Georgia case. So like I said, it's all eyes are on the appeals court in Washington, this immunity fight. Really, whether or not this immunity ruling goes his way, that's what we'll either get this trial or we won't before the election.
Insights from Bloomberg's Eric Larson, our legal reporter, as the ground shifts beneath our feet once again. Eric, thank you. Also today, in what would likely be our lead story on any other day, a blowout U.S. jobs report. With January payrolls topping all estimates by a long shot, Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su weighed in earlier here on Bloomberg.
For President Biden and for me, that's what we want to see, is more spending money in workers' pockets. So when you look at all of the numbers all together, it's not just that single one. This is really a sign of a strong economy that's continued to grow and continue to see broad-based growth.
Let's look under the hood on this important data here. Joining us for that, Bloomberg's Enda Curran at the table in Washington. Enda, if you're the White House, this is all up, right? Payrolls blew the doors off, wages up, but does it bring new inflation concerns? Does it change the track for the Fed?
Great numbers, over 350,000 jobs created, unemployment at 3.7%, wages up, like you say, Joe. December's numbers also revised up, so a good set of jobs data. The downside, as you say, is yes, it suggests at the very least it will complicate the Fed's job to bring down interest rates in an environment where the economy is still doing great with jobs. And, of course, it might complicate this whole inflation story anyway. There's a linkage between a very hot labour market and inflation remaining somewhat high, and that's, of course, what the big concern for the Fed is.
I tell you, look back to last week, stronger than expected GDP, better than expected PCE. You go to this week, not only the jobs report today, consumer sentiment at its highest since mid-21. Can the White House officially say no recession this year?
Well, I mean, it's very close to being called a soft landing by anyone's metric. The problem for the White House is they don't seem to be getting a political dividend from these good economic numbers that you mentioned, Joe. I think part of the problem is, yes, inflation's coming down. Yes, people have jobs. That's good news. But, of course, prices for everyday living is still higher than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And that seems to be stinging people's pockets and continue to leave a legacy, I think, of a taste of sourness in everyone's mouth.
Headline on the terminal here from the Fed's Bowman, not yet at a point where rate cuts are appropriate. What do the markets think? We were at 90%, I think, for May before the report came out.
I think it was pretty much 100%. Yeah. Yesterday, it's already down to 60%. At the very least, it's pushed back. Forget about March, as you discussed earlier. May now is an open debate. It's uncertain when this rate cut might come. All I would say, though, is employment is a lagging indicator. When it does move, it moves fast. So overcoming months conditions could change and change quicker than we think. But right here, right now, it's a very strong jobs report, and it suggests the economy is in pretty good order.
It does question the take that we've heard from Senators Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, suggesting that this would destroy the job market if Jay Powell continued to hike rates, and it has been stubbornly strong. Pretty remarkable. Enda, thank you so much for the insights and the reporting. Enda Curran with us today at Bloomberg as we get things started on Balance of Power. A lot more ahead with the economic take from the White House next. We'll be joined by Heather Boushey of the Council of Economic Advisors. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Wow, look, the economy is really strong.
What an amazing jobs report.
This is a very strong report and a strong labor market.
This is an exceptional labor market.
You really have to squint to see the cracks in the system.
I do think it's a bit of a headache for the Fed.
The Fed doesn't have to normalize policy as quick.
March is off the table.
We never thought the Fed was going to make a move in March.
You are more likely to get the 3 cuts that the Fed has signaled, 3 to 4, rather than the higher number that the markets has been romancing.
The aggressive market pricing in of a lot of cuts this year are starting to come out.
June is what I think should happen and what I think is likely to happen. And this report just feeds into that.
The wow reaction this morning from economists and market watchers to the January jobs report, as you saw here on Bloomberg TV and heard on Bloomberg Radio. Joining us now from the White House to dig into the data, Heather Boushey of the Council of Economic Advisors from a chilly North Lawn. It's good to see you, Heather. Thank you for being with us. You consider the data we got just today alone, not only jobs, but consumer sentiment. What we heard last week about GDP, it's continuing a composite of very positive economic news. So when's the recession?
You know, I like to think of this economy as the little engine that could. It just keeps chugging along, and it's got this solid foundation that it's moving from. We're growing at this strong, steady, stable rate. We got good news today, and as you noted, on top of good news from GDP and strong consumer spending, strong real disposable growth in personal income last week as well. So what we learned today is that we created 353,000 jobs, and this last month marks the 2-year anniversary of seeing the unemployment rate below 4%. It held steady last month at 3.7%, but this below 4% for 2 years, that's a record going back over half a century. And that, I think, is a real testament to the strength of this economy and the ongoing strength of this economic recovery.
There were some concerns in this report about wages rising. I'm guessing that is good news for the White House as well, to be able to message to people that there's more money in their pockets. But it was a deliberate increase in wages, and I wonder if you have any concern with the progress that's been made on inflation that could reignite prices.
Well, let's be very clear. The president certainly wants to see workers' real take-home pay go up, especially after the fact that we have had this inflation. Getting those wages to be higher than inflation is really an important piece of the puzzle. And so we did get good news today. Over the past year, wages rose by 4.5%. And so that pace of growth means that there's more money in people's pockets. They're able to cope with the higher prices that they've been facing. And, combined with the fact that there are jobs out there, that means that there's more economic opportunity. It's consistent with so much other data we see out there. And I would add, in terms of the economic opportunity, we also saw that we've seen 3 years now of record high numbers of people starting small businesses. So that opportunity, that sense of optimism, those higher wage gains, that higher income all feeds into it. And then, of course, that all feeds into the stable demand that has been powering economic growth.
Bloomberg spoke today with the former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers after the numbers came out. Here's his take, Heather. We'll have you respond.
The economy's been surprising on the upside for a while, so I was surprised, not shocked. It was a very strong number. And what that suggests is that despite the interest rate hikes of the Fed, there's a lot of strength in the economy.
Stubborn strength, it seems, Dr. Boushey, and I wonder if you worry about that. I won't ask you about the Fed or what Jay Powell's working on, but concerns about things like mortgage rates, the ability to borrow money, folks who may not be as well off. Going into the second half of this year, do you expect any relief for consumers?
Well, let's be clear. Consumers have been getting relief. We have seen the pace of price increases go down. Over the past 6 months, that has been more at the 2% level than not. And so that has certainly been progress. And of course, we did see that, there have been some specific goods that are really important to consumers where prices are actually lower than they had been a year ago. Toys, appliances, the price of eggs and milk, for example. And certainly the president understands that there are higher prices, but, we have seen those paces slow. I think the real challenge here has been that economic forecasters haven't been getting, haven't had the right crystal ball to predict the economy. Over a year ago, they predicted that in 2023 we would see a decline of 0.1% growth on average, and in fact we saw that the economy grew by over 3%. And so I think that the problem is really that we're coming out of this historic pandemic, and getting those numbers right, getting our sense of how quickly we could recover, because the president took bold, decisive actions. And because we've been making these investments all across the United States that have been crowding in private capital, I think it's been hard for forecasters to get it right. But I think what we see now with this data, is that looking in the rearview mirror, things have been actually much better than we had anticipated. And that is great news for American families. And it really does mean we have strength in our economy right now.
A lot of broken crystal balls out there, Heather Boushey. I want to ask you lastly about an important component of this report. Women entering the workforce help to offset a decline in men's workforce participation. That stood out to me because of the conversation that we were having at the end of last year on the precipice of what the administration and others were referring to as the child care cliff, knowing that COVID incentives, funding for child care programs was coming to an expiration. Is this good or bad news? Are women getting back into the workforce because they are losing, in many cases, that child care or that economic relief? Or did the child care cliff not materialize?
Well, I think it's what's really important here is that families need access to care services. They need access to home care. They need access to child care so that they can get to work. And that was one of the core planks of the American Rescue Plan, was to make sure that families had access to those, and also to make sure that those jobs are good jobs for those workers that have them. And we've seen that jobs have come back in home care, but we haven't seen all those jobs come back in child care yet. And so that creates challenges for families. We know that the United States still is behind many of our economic competitors in our labor force participation rates for both men and women. We have room to grow there, but that really does hinge on making sure that workers have the supports they need to be able to participate fully in employment. And I'll note, too, on the cliff issue, it's not one cliff. It's because the states all each have their own programs that, this has been sort of moving off in phases. So we are very concerned about what's happening to families. The president has been concerned about that from day one. But we are heartened to see these labor force participation numbers. It does mean that women want to be in the labor force. They want to have access to this enormous economic opportunity in front of us.
Well, and we'll see what an expanded child tax credit does if this tax bill ever sees the light of day in the Senate. Heather, great to see you. Dr. Heather Boushey of the Council of Economic Advisors, live from the White House. Thanks for the insights on this Jobs Day. Still ahead, the U.S. launching strikes in Syria and Iraq in retaliation for the killing of 3 troops in Jordan last weekend. We will speak with former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey. He's next on Breaking News on Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. The U.S. launching airstrikes against Iran-backed militias in Syria and Iraq just a short time ago, of course, in retaliation for a drone attack that killed 3 American soldiers last week in Jordan. President Biden, in a statement just out, says our response began today. It will continue at times and places of our choosing. The United States, he writes, does not seek conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world, unquote. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Anna Edgerton, who's had an eye on this throughout the day here. Anna, we've been learning some specifics from CENTCOM about the scale and scope of these strikes, but to the president's point, this was expected to be multi-tiered, and there will likely be more where this came from. What is the overall goal here as we attack these Iranian-backed proxies without actually going to Iran itself?
Well, 2 things, really. The first, obviously, is retaliation for the death of these 3 service members in Jordan, which was the first deaths of U.S. service members in a hostile action in nearly 3 years. The other goal, though, is to degrade the ability of these proxy militias to carry out these attacks. In addition to the drone attack that killed these 3 service members, there have been more than 100 attacks on U.S. installations in the Middle East. So clearly what the U.S. has done so far has not deterred or degraded the ability of these militias to carry out these attacks. I just spoke with Jake Auchincloss. He's a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, also a Marine, and I asked him what the United States response should be. And he said, we have to not just cut off the tentacles of the octopus, but get the octopus in the eye. Go after the Quds commanders who are ordering these attacks wherever they may be.
Congressman Auchincloss has certainly been an ally to Joe Biden in making the case for military action from Afghanistan to Ukraine, now to the Middle East. And what form, then, might that take if we try to go to the head of the octopus? Isn't that Tehran?
Well, I asked him exactly that. Does that mean strikes on the actual territory of Iran? And he deferred to Biden and said, I'll leave that to the president and his wisdom. But these Quds commanders, you know, they are kind of the CIA of the Revolutionary Guards, if you will, from Iran. So they do travel outside the country, and they are operating in Syria, in Iraq. And he said, you know, we need to go after not just the supply chains and the bases, but we need to go after the people so that anyone within that force is afraid of being promoted because they think they could be a target from U.S. strikes.
Times and places of our choosing could mean a lot of different things. I only have 30 seconds here, Anna. Do we have any sense of what happens after today?
Well, you know, we'll see how and if Iran responds. But, you know, one thing to keep an eye on is that both the United States, as we just saw in Biden's statement, and Iranian officials have said they're not seeking war, but they're not afraid to do what's needed.
Anna, thanks for joining here in a breaking news environment today. Bloomberg's Anna Edgerton with us on Balance of Power. Coming up, we'll have more on the strikes in Iraq and Syria. With a voice of experience, former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey. He'll be with us next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thank you for joining us as we turn to the former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey. Part of the conversation now is we understand strikes have begun. Bloomberg reporting that the U.S. has begun retaliatory strikes against Iranian-backed militias and former, well, in this case, I should say, Revolutionary Guard officials in Iraq and Syria, as opposed to mainland Iran. And we're going to get into this with the ambassador, with 85 airstrikes now being reported by CENTCOM. Mr. Ambassador, I know you've been in touch with your contacts here, and based on your experience in both Iraq and Syria, what are you hearing? What can you tell us is happening now?
Well, this is a significant escalation from the very cautious and off and on retaliatory strikes that we have seen, just a handful in response to 160 attacks on U.S. personnel and U.S. ships by Iranian surrogates since October. So we have to see how Iran and surrogates will respond. But the fact that we have done this in such great numbers with such a variety of aircraft and ordnance, and that these may continue for days, is an indication that President Biden wanted to really deter these people from launching more attacks on American interests and American forces.
What does it tell you when we're sending long-range bombers, B-1 bombers from the U.S. around the world to conduct these strikes as opposed to assets in the theater?
Well, first of all, in some cases, it may be that that is the right asset for a specific target. In other cases, it is to show determination. Our capabilities are not questioned by Iran, the Russians, the Chinese, or anybody else. What is questioned is our intentions, our will to risk escalation from the other side, to risk losing more Americans in order to defend interests in the region. That's what people have raised questions about. There will be probably less questions after this, but again, this is just starting, and we have to see how the other side plays it.
Ambassador, I want to ask you about timing. This is an interesting component of the story. These retaliatory strikes have been in the works for 5 days, and there's been quite a bit of telegraphing in that time from the Pentagon. In fact, we heard a bit about this just a couple of days ago from the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Let's listen to what he said and have you respond. Here's the Secretary.
In terms of telegraphing about strikes and whether or not people leave or will have left, I won't speculate on any of that. I would just tell you that, we will have a multi-tiered response, and again, we have the ability to respond a number of times depending on what the situation is.
Here we are several days later, Ambassador, with the strikes underway. Was there a deterrent effect? Was that a deliberate act of telegraphing on behalf of the Pentagon? And I ask you that because we actually saw Iran start to pull out some of its Revolutionary Guard units from Syria in advance of the strikes. Was part of the purpose here to force the snake to recoil on its own?
Certainly, and more importantly was the major Iranian-backed militia in Iraq that was probably responsible for the Jordan strike, Hatib Hezbollah, announced that it would not launch any more attacks on the United States. So the Iranians were removing their, as we say, high-value targets back to Iran, and others were trying to duck responsibility and calm down. Nonetheless, we did act after a prudent waiting period. The other thing of note is this came on the very day that President Biden went out to the air base to greet the 3 fallen American soldiers who were killed in that attack. So you have a certain, if you will, cosmic balance between the loss of American lives and what we do in response.
Ambassador, I want our viewers and listeners to know that you are also special presidential envoy for the global coalition to counter ISIS, the Islamic State. You know this part of the world better than most people here in America. Can you speak to Tower 22 and why that piece of land was so important, why it was targeted to begin with by these proxies?
Officially, Tower 22 in Jordan is a support facility for a small detachment of American troops across the border in Syria at a place called Al-Tam, controlled by the Americans and elements of, they're still around, the anti-Assad Syrian, Free Syrian Army opposition that we happen to support only there. The official mission of the folks in Al-Tam and across the border at Tower 22 is to participate in the fight against the Islamic State, this Sunni terrorist group that emerged from al-Qaeda in 2014. And in a way, they do that peripherally. But the real purpose is to sit astride the major highway between Tehran and Beirut, what we call the Shia Crescent, Iran's outreach into the Levant, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, to block land transportation, particularly in a crisis. So this is extremely sensitive terrain. I have been involved in negotiations with the Russians and others on their press to get the United States out of there. It is a very significant, if small, area that plays a primary role, not officially, but a primary role, in fact, in the somewhat on-again, off-again efforts by this and previous administrations to restrain and contain Iran.
Well, we've got a sense of how important it is. Certainly today, Ambassador, I'm looking at a statement from the Secretary of Defense. This was just released a short time ago following the strikes being made official. Lloyd Austin writes, quote, "The president has directed additional actions to hold the IRGC and affiliated militias accountable for their attacks on U.S. and coalition forces." How do you interpret that line, Ambassador? Are we surging new assets into the region?
Well, first of all, we have enough assets. Again, we may bring in things like B-1 bombers for military purposes or for political signaling, but we have a hell of a lot of assets in the region right now. No, the interesting thing is that we have gone beyond accusing and striking the Iranian surrogates and including the IRGC, at least in that statement. We don't know yet if in the strikes. That is a step forward, but there is a difference between the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, an element of the Iranian state, and Iran itself. We have not taken that step yet. We haven't struck targets in Iran, and we haven't accused Iran of being, well, we say indirectly behind by supporting and arming, but we have been pretty careful. My view is eventually, if we really want to deter Iran, we have to bring it closer to Iran.
When will it be time to make a judgment then on whether these strikes were effective?
Well, what we will see is not, and I've been through this in 2011, in 2018, in 2020, after we killed Qasem Soleimani. I mean, I've seen this movie many times. Strikes will not halt, but their frequency and the threat that they pose will almost certainly drop as Iran and friends will have to send some kind of signal that they're not just rolling over and giving up, but that they do not want a yet bigger provocation. The key question I have, and we all should have, is if we have, in doing this, also signaled to Iran that the next time Americans suffer casualties, we will strike targets in Iran. In our experience, that's the only thing that really deters Iran. So time will tell whether this has been enough.
Ambassador, we appreciate your joining us. Former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey, with us tonight on Bloomberg. Joining us now for more background on this conflict, how we got here at this important moment, or what the Secretary of Defense calls a dangerous moment in the Middle East, is Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Tyler?
Joe, I don't need to tell you, this didn't just start with this attack. Iran and the U.S. have a long and tangled political history, yet there is one clear thread between them in the energy sector. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, Iran is home to the world's third largest oil reserves, making it a critical supplier to the global market.
Oil's played an important role in Iran's predating the 1979 revolution, and it continues to do so today.
Experts say Iran's economy has always put energy front and center. The industry was nationalized in 1951, a move that factored into a U.S. and UK-supported coup 2 years later, as Western powers vied for a piece of the Middle East energy market. Facing pressure, the new Western-backed Shah agreed to give U.S., UK, and French oil companies a major stake in the sector in 1954, setting up a critical partnership when Iran became a founding member of OPEC nearly 5 years later. But that alliance would soon unravel. The 1979 revolution saw Iran's pro-American Shah dethroned and established the Islamic Republic known today. It also resulted in a hostage crisis. 52 people were held for 444 days at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. As the U.S. worked towards a resolution, one of its first actions was an embargo on Iranian oil. From that moment on, the U.S. has often looked towards economic deterrence to stifle Iran and its proxies with a focus on energy.
It's been used as a tool for sanctions. There's a recognition that if you embargo or sanction Iranian oil, that you're putting pressure on the regime, and there's certainly evidence of that.
Under this deal, Iran has agreed that it will not stockpile the materials needed to build a weapon.
Sanctions have often been aimed at deterring Iran's nuclear energy program. In 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Nuclear Deal, imposed restraints on Iran's nuclear program in return for easing most sanctions.
They have not lived up to the spirit of their agreement.
President Trump ultimately pulled out of the agreement and reinstated sanctions in 2018. Talks to restart the plan under the Biden administration have mostly stalled amid unrest in Tehran.
I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. That's not what I'm looking for.
That brings us to today, where U.S. lawmakers are trying to find a path forward as tensions escalate in the region and around the world. Experts say holding Iran accountable has geopolitical risks beyond the region. Today, China is Iran's largest trade partner and also the largest importer of Iranian crude. Joe, data shows that Chinese imports of Iranian oil last year topped 1 million barrels per day.
How about that? And I'll tell you, I guess Iran and China have something in common here, as they're bringing both sides of the aisle together in Washington. If there's something bipartisan, it's this axis of Iran and China.
Exactly right. I spent most of my mornings this week running around the halls of Congress trying to pin lawmakers down on the type of response they want to see the U.S. take. Some were more measured. Some more hawkish members, for example, were advocating for direct strikes into Iran. But regardless of the type of response that they wanted to see, the through line I kept hearing again and again was the message this needs to send, not just to Iran, but to other U.S. adversaries around the world. You heard me mention China there. Yeah. I want you to take a listen to these two senators on opposite sides of the aisle, the importance that they're placing on this moment.
We want to make sure that in responding, that we're responding in a manner and a form and with a tenacity that's required to send the kind of message the president is trying to send.
The focus of the United States should not be pretending that we can exercise complete control over everything. It has to be rebuilding our strength so that we have a little bit more influence across the world.
So, of course, Senator Tom Carper there, a Democrat from Biden's home
find
state.
Two people very much further apart. There's J.D. Vance as well from Ohio, singing from the same book.
Exactly. Both of them talking about how imperative this message is to allies and adversaries around the world.
Who says that Democrats and Republicans can't get along. It's a moment like this, actually, that can frequently produce bipartisan action. Tyler, great history here to help us understand how we got to this moment. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, we thank you. Coming up, the U.S. launching airstrikes, as we've been mentioning, in retaliation against Iran, but doing so in Syria and Iraq. We'll be with our political panel next, their take on balance of power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. The retaliation by the U.S. against the drone strikes that killed 3 U.S. service members in Jordan has begun. Our political panel, Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, and Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University, are with us now. Great to have you both here, Rick and Jeannie. We've been talking about this for 5 days. And, Rick, I wonder what you make of the timing.
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of people have been critical that it took so long to respond.
Are you one of them?
I think so. My view is we had these plans in advance. We're very well organized. Something hits us. We know what we have the options to do. Maybe they wanted to move other assets into space, like the B-1s, but those can be moved anywhere overnight, right? So, I think the contemplation for 5 days of what to do and to actually execute it, I'm not going to second guess it, but I think, certainly many of us would have been much happier with a much quicker response.
What do you think of what we're seeing here in terms of the targets that were chosen? Jeannie, there were concerns that the U.S. might hit Iran and start a wider war. Was this the appropriate reaction?
You know, I don't think it is terribly surprising because they had been telegraphing for, as you've mentioned, 5 days, essentially, where they were going to hit. I think the big question now is, does this effort at deterrence work? This is certainly an escalation. And when you read the president's statement, it is very clear they are telling the world, and particularly the proxies in Iran, that this is in direct retaliation to what happened to the 3 service men and women and the 40 that were wounded. And so, the question, though, now is, was it enough to deter? And, in the past, we have hit and they have hit back. And so deterrence is a tricky game. It is very, very hard for us to achieve. But I would say that I think that this is one of the most important moments of President Biden's presidency, is this moment today in this crisis. You go back 50, 60 years, this is the area of the world that has confounded U.S. presidents. We've tried to ignore it. We've tried to address it. You can't do either with the Middle East. They wanted to turn to China. They can't do what they wanted to do. They are stuck with this crisis. And boy, it is going to be a test for this administration.
You mentioned the president's statement, Jeannie. It reads, in part, our response began today. It will continue at times and places of our choosing. Rick, are we going to hear calls from Congress, if this becomes a longer-term commitment here, to seek authorization for the use of military force?
You know, it depends on the level of conflict. If it's just this kind of tit-for-tat activity, I doubt it. Yeah. I mean, Congress, I don't think, really wants to get into this act. They've got a lot on their plate. And the real focus is on Israel and what's happening in the Gaza. So, you know, keeping our eye on that at the same time. I would say, as Ambassador Jeffrey said earlier in the program, you know, high-value targets were able to get back to Iran, yes, right, you know, during this interim period. So waiting actually was like an excuse for, like, okay, all the brass, get out of here. We're going to just go in and, you know, take out a bunch of your facilities with expendable troops. At some point in time, I think the senior ranking officers have to pay for this kind of incursion into U.S. Facilities. So at the bottom line, you know, it's a wait-and-see thing. We have plenty of assets in the region to do whatever we want to do. It's going to be up to the president to determine what pace and what intensity this conflict goes at. And I think official Washington has to wait and see, you know, what direction he takes.
The president was at Dover earlier today, Jeannie, for the dignified transfer of those 3 service members who were killed last weekend in the attacks that brought forth this retaliation. He also met with their families. And as he said here in his statement, I attended the dignified return. I have spoken with each of their families. I suspect he told them what was about to transpire here. This is quite a day for President Biden. How will it be received nationally?
You know, it is very important, and he did it both by his presence at Dover today with the First Lady. He did it in his statement. I do hope at some point we hear from him directly, if not today, in the coming days on this. He has tried hard to say that when we are hit and you hurt U.S. troops, we will retaliate. And I think you know, it's not really a surprise that we hit right after he went to Dover, because it's a message that we want to send, the president wants to send. You know, as he has said, we are not looking for a fight. We are not looking for a war, but we will respond, and we will do so dramatically. I think one question to keep in mind is, does this result in a response from the proxies or Iran? I mean, you know, every president, go back to President Trump, when we took out Soleimani, 2 days later, there was an attack. And then 2 months later, there was an attack that killed American soldiers. We don't talk about those a lot because we didn't strike back on those. But the reality is we could be confronting more challenges and hopefully not more injury to our troops if there is a response from either the Iran or these proxies to any of this.
Certainly there will be some response. I'm assuming, Rick, will that determine then what is next in this multi-tiered effort? The Pentagon does the initial round of strikes and then waits to see what happens the next day or 2 days later.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, they've responded in kind, and I think the ball's in Iran's court. And to the extent that Iran even controls these militias that they've funded and equipped around the world. Yeah. You know, any one of these could make an attack based on their own self-interest, and Iran would have to ultimately pay a price for that. So Iran's got to clamp down. You know, these are problems they've created for the world, and they got to show some responsibility for that. And their ability to do that is going to be dramatically increased now that it's getting closer and closer to them. I think they're going to rein in. But again, we don't know what their motivation is. If they're trying to cause chaos in the Middle East, attacks from Yemen, attacks from Syria, attacks from Iraq, attacks from Hezbollah, attacks from Hamas, these are all their proxies. And so they got a lot of work to do if they think that they're going to get out of this with just today's attack.
This could become a lot more deliberate here. Of course, Jeannie, this is taking place during a debate here in Washington about whether to fund our allies in Ukraine. And yes, Israel, as Rick Davis reminds us, that's why we are in the region right now. And it's hinging on a border deal. We might get text on that deal tonight or at some point over the weekend. We've been promised. Jeannie, I wonder if you see what's happening now, maybe change some minds on Capitol Hill when it comes to funding our allies in hot wars, if that could unlock funding for both Ukraine as well as Israel.
I certainly hope it does. It should. I mean, when you think about it, Ukraine has fought on their own. They are asking us to support them monetarily. We had an op-ed from Bill Burns just the other day. He was saying, and it is true, that this is the least we should be doing. We aren't being asked to pay with the lives of U.S. men and women overseas in the case of Iran. And this unfortunate incident involving the strike and the drone strike shows what that is like. So we should fund Iran, we should fund Israel, and we should do that in the supplemental that the president put forward. But of course, there's bipartisan support for that. But once the Republicans put in the immigration, that has tied this whole thing up. So I'm not sure if and when we could get that done.
Jeannie just said a lot, Rick. I just wonder where your head is on this, because you were pretty optimistic about a border deal happening, which would have unlocked all the rest of this. Chuck Schumer says he's putting the president's supplemental on the floor. Let's get an up or down vote. Is that the right move?
Yeah, look, first of all, Joe Biden put the border deal on the supplemental, not the Republicans. And I think it's actually a good idea, because now it gives the Republicans an opportunity to do something on the border in exchange for their support for Ukraine and Israeli aid. So, yeah, I think Schumer's going to take the vote on Wednesday, and we're going to see how it goes. My guess is you have a majority, a supermajority in the Senate that's going to support this package. And then the question is going to flip over to the House and see whether or not Speaker Johnson is able to move it. The question is he a proxy of Donald Trump at this point, since we're using that term a lot, or is he going to serve as a speaker and try and get something done on the border that has not been done for decades?
Those are some big questions that we have yet to answer. We'll see if the text changes any thoughts on this. Big thanks to Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano for the insights today. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter. We'll see you back here Monday on Bloomberg.